Recorded May 14th, 2026. Good afternoon, Franklin. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Edward. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. Well, we're going to deviate from the way that we generally run the show for everybody just joined the live stream. And for those who will be listening to it a little bit later, we have some really distinguished guests coming on from an up and coming security vendor, DataBahn. So we'll keep all the banter toward the end of the show and some show notes. With that being said, I'd like to welcome our guest to the show from DataBahn. Would you like to introduce yourself? We have the CEO and co-founder, as well as the co-founder and chief product officer. So, floor is yours.
Sure. Frank and Edward, thank you for having us here. Pleasure to be here. I'm Nitya Naresh Kumar, president and co-founder at DataBahn. Just a little bit about my background. I come from the industry, the enterprise. I built my career at JP Morgan. I was managing director at DTCC, working through enterprise systems all my career, working with data systems all my career. And taking a step back a few years ago, when Adi and our CEO Nanda were spitballing ideas about solving the data pipeline problem for security workloads and beyond, I felt it was a problem that had to be solved for, right? Today, data engineering is extremely cumbersome at enterprises. And I was living that pain in my day-to-day when I was running enterprise systems at both DTCC and JP Morgan, which is why I decided to jump ship and co-pilot this journey with both of them. And over to you, Adi.
Thanks, Nitya. And like Nitya said, Edward, Frank, thanks for having us. My name is Aditya. I'm one of the co-founders and a CPO at DataBahn.ai. And my background, I spent a good part of my life, at the intersection of security data, threat detections, threat research, analytics. I was a founding engineer previously at a SIM company called Securonics, where I spent a little over a decade there, building different, programs on the engineering solutions, threat research and analytics side, till the point where we realized that a lot of security problems that we were seeing were just data problems disguised as security problems. So that pretty much, led to DataBahn and where we are today.
Very cool. So we know who you are, we know the history, we know the name of the company, but let's just keep it simple for our users. So who may not have read the pre-show notes readout, who and what is DataBahn?
So think of us as a intelligent data pipeline and data orchestration layer. So that's where we come in. Cybersecurity is has been our first use case, where we, as a pipeline or a data fabric solution, sit in between all data sources and consuming platform, and we are the layer that intelligently moves data based on relevance, right? A lot of the security architectures now is going through a fragmentation again. There's a lot of distribution. There's a lot of hey, let me not move data all over everywhere. I think the consumers are evolving, right? There's no longer just systems that are consumers anymore. Where there's fixed dashboards or fixed set of analytics. There's agents that are now coming as consumers. So so we act as that intelligent data layer or data foundation for customers. So that's where DataBahn comes in.
Okay. All right.
In a nutshell, right, I would say, like what Adi was saying, we move data and we meaningfully move data from the disparate sources to the destinations. And when data moves, we do several processing elements with it so the destination can meaningfully use the data, right? So at the end of it, after we finish the processing, it's high fidelity data for use for the destination, whether it's the SIM, whether it's your data lake, whether it's even your agentic processes that need the data.
That makes sense. I primarily work in the intelligent SOC, modern SOC, AI empowered SOC. If I had to nail down to a product, I was one of the original Sentinel, program person in engineering. It would be a stretch to say creative, but I was almost there day one. And so it was very interesting to see the companies that came into existence, because I won't say deficiencies or way that Sentinel ingests data, but it's so rigid, and companies like yourself come in and loosen the rigidity up a little bit and allow some creativity in the way that data is being ingested and used, as well as some of the things that, for lack of better words, the people that hold the purse strings, hey, how much did this cost? And it's still it's still falling to a lot of individuals of ingestion costs rather than license costs, or what you bring in. So I was super interested in see you come into the foray and do these things. Give me an example of how DataBahn would come into a customer and evaluate where the most impactful use case would be. And I'll make it simple. I'll just give a person that says, I'll give 3 scenarios. Let's just do the easy one first. They want to go to an enterprise SIM. They want to start greenfield. They chose to use Microsoft Sentinel as the SIM of choice. When you would come in and start engaging with that customer, what would be some of the things and considerations that you would ask to get them to adopt your product?
Yeah. So the question was more towards adopting our product, right, Edwin? That's what. Yeah. I think first and foremost, we'd like to understand, from the customer, what their security goals are, right? Because oftentimes, to all the concerns that you laid out, right, in terms of platforms being rigid in terms of what kind of data that they accept or not, or the economic aspects of using the SIM, that coming in the way of a lot of SOC teams trading off. Hey, this is what I can actually bring into the SIM, and I'm going to have a lot of these other sources, sitting on the sidelines because we don't have the room or the, the budget, for us to, bring everything in. So we try to understand what the customer's objectives are, right, and we kind of retrofit that into rationalizing data at the pipeline layer, right? So that as a pipeline, we like to be the first point of data collection. So pretty much anything that's non-first party, right? Let's say anything that you natively support within Microsoft, you're good to go. But you've got customers, living in a heterogeneous hybrid ecosystem where there's a lot of third-party integrations and third-party sources, that they want to bring in sources from on-prem and all of that. So we help, rationalize this data based on relevance, based on what the customers are trying to do. So the pipeline now intelligently orchestrates data across different tiers, between analytics or lake or long-term storage, so that now the customers are not sacrificing security objectives with cost constraints or other platform-related constraints in mind, right? So we kind of work from that angle, right? So that that naturally now makes DataBahn a intelligent orchestrator, right? So that as their need evolves, they're able to now very quickly move pipelines over. The second scenario that we often run into is today a lot of companies are native Microsoft shops. They have access to Sentinel as a SIM, for instance, right? But then history has always taught a lot of security teams that migrating from one SIM to another is a big pain, right? And we've seen a lot of security teams just live with the pain because they just don't want to. They've had a lot of battle scars in their previous SIM migration. They don't want to move this. And anytime you even go tell them, hey, you have access to a better SIM solution, right? Why don't you just move on? You see them often raise concerns like, hey, that means I'm going to have a portion of my team now dedicated towards this. I got to go justify to my leadership that we need to have 2 SIM solutions in place till we establish parity and all of that, right? Now as a pipeline, it's just adding a new tap at the end of the pipe, right? So that's where we make things much simple for them, right? We've had some of the largest organizations with thousands of data feeds cut over to Sentinel or their SIM of choice in under 2 weeks, under 3 weeks time as a result of that, right? So bringing that agility, bringing that ability for customers to use any platform, any capability, adopt any new technology has become a non-event as a result of that, right? So those are some places we shine, and I think those conversations naturally gravitate towards customers now rethinking that architecture and understanding the importance of a pipeline. And obviously at the end of all of this, they also get the byproduct of cost optimization, right? Reduce costs and all of that, right? So that's like a cherry on top.
Yeah, and we meet the customers where they are at, right? Because while going through all of this, introducing a pipeline, sometimes we get asked the question, are we going to compromise on detection as a result of this, right? By routing the data to multiple destinations. But no, for us, we have different throttling levels in terms of what data goes into the SIM versus a data lake or any other destination. So our pipeline is that intelligent pipeline that Adi was talking about earlier, ensuring that we do not compromise on the enterprise's detection capabilities.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because once the data is landed to where it's ultimately going to be, you start to lose a lot of the ability to do a lot of manipulation because it's sometimes it's in its final state. So you need to be able to transform, mutate, aggregate, do whatever you want to do with the data before you get it there, because there are limitations that may often require re-ingestion of the data, even to the point where you're trying to do enterprise queries across huge, data lakes. But there's a finality once the data is where it's supposed to be. So being able to get it to in the way that you want it before you land it is a big thing. Let me ask the easy question, and either one. DataBahn, who came up with the name? it's a cool name.
I'm gonna take Adi. You should take that one. You definitely should take that one.
Yeah. So so we were toying with this idea of data highway and all of that, and then so it was me who came with the name of DataBahn, and then I think our CEO back then was in Europe, and he saw Bahn this, Bahn that, so I think it was meant to be. So yeah, we pretty much went with DataBahn as the name as a result, right?
Okay. Yeah, Data Highway was just too boring. And Adi was like, why would we call the product Data Highway? It should be DataBahn, a high-speed data highway. Yes, and that's how it came about. Yeah.
I had an affinity for it. I like driving fast cars very fast. So I saw they got the similar. I said DataBahn, unlimited speed limit, right? Being able to get it in.
Yeah.
Everything can't be roses and sunshine and good things. Give me some difficulties that you had to not only address, which made your company viable, but also you've had to address that made it go, ugh, I didn't think about that. We didn't solve for that. What challenges have there been? Because we still see a huge ask for companies like yours to be able to come in and help individuals not only put value to the data beyond just saying I need it, but give me a couple of challenges that you saw with your company and that you still think that needs to be solved as people adopt more and more data coming in, because data trimming is not going down. People have figured out how to get more data at cheaper costs, more valuable data use case. So challenges that you're addressing, challenges you've had to overcome.
Yeah. So in terms of challenges that we had to overcome, I think when during our initial days, this whole concept of, hey, let's put a pipeline in there that can rationalize and help you save on costs, that can get your data to rightful systems, all of that sounded great. It became a no-brainer when you had conversations with a lot of prospects back in the day. But then you often realize that, hey, we are the last ones coming to the table, right? You already have customers with all of their sources integrated in the SIM, right? Which means, there is a body of work that's needed in terms of reconfiguring this, re-architecting this, right? And if you go, this was, the late part of 2023, early 2024, right? When you went and spoke to, organizations in terms of introducing a pipeline, right? To a lot of them, this whole concept of a pipeline was very new, right? People have lived through a lot of SIM migrations. So if you said that, hey, here is a SIM company and here is a SIM product, that you need to swap. Yeah, people have done this 3 or 4 times in their life, or many times, depending on the organization, to know what to expect, right? But now introducing a pipeline layer, which is just the means, but the end is still going to be the SIM, right? That was a big shift or a period of education, that we had to do in the market, right? For them to understand, what would this mean and what are the upsides of them now decoupling data ingestion and data processing, which was always a foundation on which the SIM existed all along, right? So so we had to take some creative approaches in terms of not making it difficult for customers to say that, hey, we have our own set of agents or collectors that you have to put or replace this, so that the pipeline didn't turn out to be a glorified agent replacement project and all of that, right? So we tried to keep a lot of our integration pieces very simple. A lot of our integration pieces very opinionated. Mm-hmm. And because DataBahn, we started just at the boom of LLMs and people starting to adopt AI as part of different facets in their ecosystem. We tried to use AI less as a co-pilot to help with automation, but more in terms of how do I focus on using AI at the places where people hurt the most, right? In terms of writing regular expressions, writing data transformations, understanding schemas, right? So that we wanted to embed AI every step along the way, as opposed to just putting a automation layer in the form of a copilot, right? So those, kind of alleviated a lot of those, concerns. So going into a conversation, we were able to pretty much, give them a blueprint of, how their future state would evolve, or their current state would evolve into this, future state, with DataBahn, and where do they see the maximum, ROI, right, in terms of effort that they need to spend versus what they gain at the end of it, right? So that was a bit of a challenge, that we had to overcome, keeping it open, keeping it agnostic, so that we are not forcing any agents or collectors, but we could simply exist in an ecosystem. And over time, we've also seen, again, this is again a mind shift, right, with a lot of SOC teams. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you'd asked me, I would have said that, hey, I need to have all the data, right? More data means more security, right? That's the mindset that everybody operated on, right? But then unwiring that thought process to now say that, hey, you need to focus on contextualized data for your detections to work. It doesn't matter whether you just get 10% of your data. Ultimately, it's the data that matters, that needs to come into your SIM or to your detection tools, right? So that was a big shift that we had to go through with a lot of our early customers. And what we also made sure is at the pipeline layer, we had intelligence, right, in terms of understanding how this data was used downstream, so that we always carry that context back to give customers the peace of mind that, hey, you're not losing security value by rerouting some parts of your data to storage, right? It's still there. You still can retrieve that when you need it. Or if your definition of what is relevant today changes over the next 3 months or 1 year, the pipeline can self-adapt and give you some of these data elements back when you need it, right? So so those were some initial set of challenges that we went through, and how we kind of helped customers also adapt to those, right? And then now I think we're entering a different phase. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of now AI agents becoming consumers to data, right? So as a pipeline, we are adapting to that, right? Making sure that, hey, how do we give contextualized data to agents? I don't think agents are going to be as forgiving as humans when you give bad data to it, right? So we have a bigger responsibility now as a pipeline layer for that. And then we're also starting to see customers adopt architectures where they don't want to move data, right? They want to move some data, they want to keep data where it is. It's great, we see the consumers, like Sentinel, for instance, adapting to that, right, where you have federated data access, and all of that. Now we're also working towards how, as a pipeline, we can help facilitate that as well, right? So that we also help orchestrate things continuously, and also help orchestrate things on demand when the need arises for customers. If you had anything to add.
No, actually, the question that you asked, Frank, made me go down memory lane a little bit, right? When we started building the product at DataBahn, right? So I'm gonna tell you a couple things that were like kind of guiding principles, if you will, right? When we were building the product, okay? One of it was making the product, as we call it, stupid simple, right? That was a key guiding principle for us. And the second was building enterprise grade product, right? So, back to the first one of stupid simple, it's very easy to build a complex product. And we are dealing with complex data workloads here, right? Now, how do you make that stupid simple, right? Like, so Adi's vision from day one was like, okay, how can we make it hands-off keyboard for a data engineer as much as possible? And by the way, DataBahn.ai came about way before generative AI became a thing, right? So the .ai was because we were going to be applying heavy machine learning into data processing back then. So, and with Adi's security analytics background, and by the way, I have a master's in neural networks, gosh, from 20 something years ago, but who's counting, right? So for us, applying those and making a product really very, very simple to use was a very important guiding principle. And a lots of kind of iterations while we were working through that, right? That was very, very challenging, Edward and Frank, right, for us. But the outcome of it was well worth it. And the second thing was enterprise grade product, right? Even before we had any customers, our goal was to tighten up the non-functional requirements. A lot of companies, when they come out of stealth or they release an MVP, they're heavily focused on the functional features, right? But for us, the non-functionals, and what do I mean by that? The performance, the availability, the scalability, right? To make it, to harden it for enterprise grade is something we were heavily, heavily focused and we were iterating on. And that's part of the reason why we've seen success so quickly with our growth with Fortune 100, Fortune 500 customers, because out the gate, we were ready for enterprises.
Yeah. That lowering that barrier and that anxiety of the evolution is super important. I think you're right. It's easy to build a complicated solution, right? And then when you get so complicated, you can't explain it to the customer.
No.
The customer is too embarrassed to admit they don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And now somebody else is going to say what's obvious in the room. I came at a very mystical view and just assuming that you were a company that was hyper fixated on security, but you're not. Data is data, right? And so it sounds like the ability to take that currency and that collateral doesn't necessarily have to be pinned to a security evolution. It could be to someone that's doing data analytics. I would imagine that you have data analytic customers that process massive amounts of things that have zero to do with security. Does your approach change based on whether it's a security company? And I know the individual data sources represent different ways to do stuff, but do you have an approach, or do you say data is data? Just tell me, how do you want it? How do you protect the integrity of it in that? Do you have some of those challenging or some of those customers that say, how do I want to ask the question? If you're bringing data in from a source that's not Microsoft, what are some of those customers looking like? Because I have a very limited skew of what I'm doing, and so everything to me looks like security. I'm a hammer. Everything looks like a nail. So what about some of the customers that are non-security of that? Do you have any really good stories around that?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And again, just, one of the reasons, that we focused on cybersecurity as a starting point, Edward, is that, when we looked at, the problems are the same, right? Whether you're dealing with, the security audience or, the IT ops or the application teams and all of that. But security had an interesting additional challenge as well. You never had a concept of data engineering and cybersecurity, right? Other teams usually had data engineers operating in different capacity, but with security, it's more often than not just SOC teams, doubling down as data engineers, right? So that was the reason why we started off, more on the cybersecurity side, and we kept, a lot of the data foundations a little bit more opinionated, in the sense that, we don't want, anybody from in this day and age, to focus on writing connectors or writing regular expressions or parsers or anything like that, right? We wanted the platform to take care of a lot of that. But zooming out a bit, to your point, the challenges are still the same, right? The enormity of those challenges, depending on the verticals, depending on, whether we are talking to application teams or IT ops, teams on the observability side, they're still the same, right? In terms of the economic constraints, in terms of, making sense out of the noise, from that data, right? Again, data fragmentation, consolidating telemetry from, different application endpoints and other silos and whatnot, right? So as a foundation, we are, it's pretty open. It supports any type of telemetry, any type of data today. We have customers today where we serve both the cybersecurity consumers on one side, and also the application consumers, where DataBahn is the pipeline acting as that enterprise-wide data fabric, to write data into the data lakes, take data to their observability systems and whatnot, right? Because we also are starting to see an approach like this has opened up a lot of avenues, for now different teams to have shared access to data, right? Again, 5-10 years ago, when you speak to CISOs, they always had this roadmap item of, hey, we want to be monitoring our crown jewel applications, right? Beyond the standard in core infrastructure and all of that. But who was going to bring that data to the SIM, right? The SIM was not focusing on building integrations or connectors for that. Now, as a neutral data layer, we are helping customers do that possible, right? We have customers today bringing in hundreds of internal application log streams, to business transaction data to their Sentinel lake, right? Where they have custom analytics, running on top of it, right? So that's what that foundation looks like, right? Now you've got a federated data architecture that helps you bring any type of data to any consumers, right? Not just limited to what was previously known as security or IT streams or anything like that.
Yeah. And still a viable market because even though the SIM market is mature, I've been around long enough to remember when ArcSight was coming up through the thing and all the things that I used to do. It still presents a modern challenge because the data types, the data volume, the data transformation, the cost of being able to store and transmit is actually still relatively, decreasing of a sort. So we've overcome the first thing about 10 years into it, that people did not really understand cloud computing as OpEx rather than CapEx. And so having to go out and buy LUNs and buy storage and HBAs and all that stuff is gone now. You're just ingesting. And I think we're finally on the backside of that. But let me ask you this question. Let's get into the weeds a little bit. It seems like we've been having some really abstract questions like, okay, they manipulate data, they bring data in, they take it from source, they do the magic, and then they deposit it into a repository or destination of choice. Well, how do you do it? I've seen it on my team. They come to some great engineering things, but I'm a customer. The Microsoft Security Insights, we bring in so much telemetry and data of all types. We're pretty light. We're bringing in about 5 to 6 terabytes a day of various types. How do you onboard me? What is the lift like to be able to come in and get my data sources into my data lake inside of Azure? To our technical listeners out there, because I'm pretty sure they're hitting us up. Explain how it works, Edward. So how does it work?
Yeah. So first and foremost, we've made a lot of integrations natively available, Edward. Right. So whether it's known products that you have, your usual sources like your Palo Altos, Oktas, right? Whatever you may have it in on-prem, cloud, or third-party SaaS applications. We made a library of north of 500 integrations, readily available in the product, right? So this means these are all just one-click deployments, right? You simply, either point the data to our platforms or point our platform, to where your data is, right? We can pretty much, bring that, data in without anybody having to write a line of configuration in terms of how to make sense out of that, data, or how to optimize, that data or route that data for different platforms, right? And one thing that we've always strived on is how do we make our platforms understand each of the consumers that they connect our platforms to, so that when data leaves our platform, it's natively search ready, it's natively analytics ready, right? What I mean by that is you mentioned Lake, this customers today sending data to multiple SIM solutions where each platform has its own, 3-letter, 4-letter data model that they follow, right? So which means as a platform sending data, we want to make sure that we change or transform that data into that format that natively makes search work in those platforms, analytics work in those platforms, and all of that, right? So that's the first part of how we've made things simpler, so that your usual sources that customers may have, you can pretty much bring that in. Now, anything that goes beyond that, right? Custom applications, custom data feeds, and all of that, we've embedded AI every step along the way, so that writing normalization, right? Writing data transformations, suggesting optimizations, right? Those are native capabilities that we've made the platform do, so that you kind of have DataBahn as your 24/7 data engineer working for you, right? That helps understand complex data sources, break that down, pretty much again take the data in a way that makes sense based on the downstream systems. Now, over the last few months, what we've also focused on is we've always seen this trend, right? When you have security conferences, and right at the tail end of it, the next 1 month or 2 months, we've always seen a rise in new connector requests from customers, right? Because people see a vendor, they adopt that technology, and then it's a enhancement request to a SIM or a data pipeline solution saying that, hey, I'm trying to build this connector because we've just deployed this product. We want to bring in telemetry there. So we've focused our time and energy over the last 1 year to actually have an AI agent that can build connectors in a span of few minutes, right? So acquiring telemetry has never been more easier, right? So we made telemetry acquisition much more simpler as well, right? So they can simply let the agent do the research for you to figure out how to build the integration, or if you know how to make the integration, just give it the document, right? It can pretty much write the code and make that connector service available for you in less than 5 minutes or less than 10 minutes.
Yeah. So let me ask a real easy question. Your product is a SaaS solution, or
no, we can be deployed anywhere. We can run on cloud. We can run on customers' cloud. We can run on on premise, or we can be hybrid as well. Combination of all of those. If you have data sovereignty or other restrictions that prevents you from moving data beyond a certain geography or even move to the cloud, you can pretty much have DataBahn deployed anywhere. Yeah.
And that deployment methodology, is it an agent? Is it a solution? Is it a VM? I mean, for the worker bees that are out there that said, I'm going to bring this on, how do I procure, or how do I actually buy your product and then be able to put into my into my environment to be able to use? Because we have a lot of practitioners that also listen to our show, like, okay, I get it. How do I do it? Just a real high level. If I come in and I have I'm using a SIM or whatever it may be, and I have some login sources out there, some firewalls, what would be the first thing I do? How do I go to the site? Do I sign up? Do I buy a license? What do I do?
Yeah, you can. You could always, try, DataBahn, right? You could request for a trial either through the marketplace or through our website. But in terms of, actual, deployment goes, the collection plane, like we call it, the agents or collectors, you can run them directly on endpoints. You can run them as central collectors on VMs or on top of your Kubernetes. Our data processing layer, the pipelines, you can run this on DataBahn Cloud if you opt in for the SaaS, or you can run this on your own, AKS, or if you're running it on bare metal servers or VMs, you can deploy that as well, right? So we made that deployment part, very modular, and again, be compatible to deploy anywhere, there too.
Okay, this is what I thought it was. I just, like I said, I've seen the presentations. I've seen customers real time with it, and I get to see it in action next week. To everybody that's listening, DataBahn Roadshow, Atlanta, Georgia, May 21st. I'll be the host MC, I guess, to come out with the DataBahn team.
All right.
More information.
Can I ask questions, Edward? Edward, can I ask questions now?
Dude, I thought you had just put AI there and were frozen. You're frozen now.
Oh, okay.
I haven't seen you move. I said.
Oh, no. I've been waiting to ask questions. So a little bit more technical. So common endpoints are Linux workstation servers, Windows devices, and so on, right? Okay. So what tables do you normally write to with inside Sentinel?
So we write to both native and custom tables, Frank, right? So if you've got your common security log, syslog, some of your ASIN tables, we can write into that. We also have, some customers, when they bring in custom application data sets, they want to have their own custom schemas defined in the form of custom tables. We do that too. Yeah.
Do you utilize any of the standards there to convert to common event formats for automatically, so people don't have to do that, so they don't have to write the ASIN parsers with inside Sentinel? Yeah.
Oh, so we actually do something pretty neat, and this is where we've always loved the Microsoft stack, right? That it's been pretty open for us in terms of us being able to not just collect and throw data over the fence, but we can also understand what customers are trying to do with on this side. So which means when customers point DataBahn to a specific table that already exists, be it your common security log or your ASIN tables, we understand the schemas so that the transformation part of it is something that our pipelines now know. Oh, this is where Frank is trying to write the data into, so we can map that data accordingly. Or if it's custom schemas, then we understand that as well, right, through looking at your schemas or your DCRs, and pretty much do the alignment here, right? So as a result, like I said, when we send data, it goes in a way that your analytics, continue to work, right, without you having to do yet another round of, transformations within Sentinel.
You consult people on like what Windows events they should be collecting and how to take that in consideration if they're already running MDE. Do you help them plan that ingestion strategy or collection strategy, I should say, overall?
Yeah, we've actually made those configurations available natively in the platform to begin with, so customers get a jump start that they don't have to talk to us or do hours or days of research to figure out what is important, what is not, right? So there's that native intelligence that is available, and what we are increasingly also focusing on is, hey, how do I now have that intelligence adapt over time, based on how you're using this data on the other side, right? So that it's not a conversation that needs to be had, But let's say you introduce a new detection in your Sentinel, right? Or if tomorrow something about the data has changed, there's new event types and all of that that comes in. How do we have the platform now connect all the pieces and tell you that, hey, this is what is different about your data, right? Maybe this is how you go about now adapting your pipeline, configurations, right? So it's less about them again having to do the data research or engage our teams or working with others to figure this out for themselves.
Great.
You're, and I think this is public knowledge. You're going through. You're definitely within that startup model. How has the Project Pegasus and really help accelerate you guys around that? But that's how I knew of you through that particular project. For those who don't know, Project Pegasus is a program that Microsoft uses to help startups be able to come in that are AI born, AI native, to create products and solutions. Has that been a boon for you guys, being able to do that in addition to the other? And you have a tremendous amount of experiences. I looked at your bios before and everything else, right? I'm like, wow, this guy's been doing a long time. So how's that experience been? Has that been a very, very beneficial thing, being able to connect to a major hyperscaler like Microsoft and be able to push forward and with your solution going forward?
100%, Edward, 100%, right? I think the visibility that we've been getting thanks to, a program like Pegasus, right? It's, I think, activated a deep co-sell motion for us with Microsoft, right? And the road shows, etc., the watch parties, all of that, right? Along with the program has been incredible for us. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good program. I see huge innovations coming out of it, and to see your name, I'm like, wow, that's going to be really cool. When you look at it and you create your products, where does the innovation come? Does the innovation come from being in the trenches and understanding, I did not account for that, and I don't think we can do that as of yet? So as you go, how are you innovating with something that seems on face value very simplistic? Get my data from here to there and don't lose it and don't mess with the integrity of it and the confidentiality of it, but still innovate. This goes to you. You're out there, you're talking to other CEOs, CISOs, you're on these road shows, you're shaking hands, you're kissing babies, but they always ask, what's next? So how do you figure out what is the next as you continue to innovate your company?
I think a big part of us comes from listening to our customers, right? That's where for us the innovation begins, because fundamentally, again, one of the guiding principles, and Adi can attest to this as well, right, is not about just building products and features in a silo. No, it's about always listening to our customer, right? And it's not just about what they're just saying at face value. It's also reading between the lines, understanding their pain points, right? And taking that back and saying, okay, this is what we heard from customer A. Oh, wait a second, we heard this from customer B. But then a variation of that also came from customer C. Now, how do we bring that together to solve this pain point and apply the right technology to solve that pain point, right? It's not about, oh, there's a new shiny tool out here, now let's use that and go throw it to our customers. No, it's the other way around for us, right? We hear them in the trenches and then use that to kind of work through adding value through our product. Adi, if you want to add to that.
No, I think you summed it up well.
Yeah. Sounds like you're letting the challenges and your successes against those challenges drive innovation.
Yes.
Listening to the customers.
Yes.
Microsoft, you could take a lesson from that.
Or as Nitya calls it, bunny ears.
Yeah. But do that. And as we continue to drive through in this artificial intelligence thing that is happening, if you listened to the show 2 or 3 years ago, we used to call everything the new shiny. And artificial intelligence is still the new shiny. Has it transformed you in the way that you thought you would have gone a path with this company versus the way you're going now? Because it seems like with this thing, it changes every day, and even competitors are using each other to be able to further innovate. So when you say that, I'll give you a case example. One of the things, and it looks like your product does it, is that using some type of intelligent reasoning to say, I will automatically adjust the way that I use particular data, able to ingest, and then come back and advise the customer why are you bringing this particular data stream in? Because you have a country that you've been in years. Is this table still relevant, or can you get the same observational intelligence by using another data source and just pivoting on the different? How's AI really affecting the way that you innovate? Seems like everybody's saying, you said I can write something in AI like that. Has that changed the way that you go about taking on challenges, like things that would have been insurmountable at one time because of manpower and brain power that you can just do with AI and say, I think we can? Has that been a huge pivotal factor? And I like to talk to someone for real rather than someone says, oh my God, AI has made us so great. How? Well, it just has. How? Well, it just has. Has it really accelerated the way you guys are attempting to go down this particular path of what you're doing with your company?
No, absolutely. But lots of instances, right? Where we've seen the ability, for us to leverage AI to help accelerate capabilities to bring to the market, or look at areas where we've often again 5-10 years back we tried to see, hey, can we use a combination of machine learning and all of that to figure out how to write parsers, because I managed in my previous life a team of 40 data engineers, right, who used to look for every vendor when they changed or introduced a new product version or a new event type. That would mean that we are trying to source for samples, trying to figure out how do we make parsers updated and how do we roll out parsers to thousands of customers to make sure that they're not getting impacted as a result of new events coming in. All of that has now shrunk to a matter of a few seconds for the platform to now react autonomously, right? It doesn't take an alert going to an operations team, triggering an engineering ticket, triggering engineers to go fix something, and then that cycle is now shrunk to 5 minutes or less than 5 minutes of decisions that a platform can now take and adapt to a point where customers are becoming comfortable to take those or adopt those autonomous workflows, right? Or building net new integrations, right? Never did we think that again 5-10 years back that we'd be able to just through uploading a document to a platform, the platform can build an integration and start bringing you data and all of that, right? So I think those are capabilities on one side where we've seen what we thought was complex challenges now becoming increasingly simple, increasingly native capabilities that customers can take advantage of. And the other part of this is the whole the assurance and the making the pipelines more self-adapting, right, based on how you're using this data, right? So that anytime somebody makes a change or their usage of that data changes, now the platform can give enough justification and rationale as to why it thinks that, hey, here is how we should differently now look at the pipeline configurations from this point out, as opposed to how it was last 6 months or the 6 months prior to that, and things like that, right? So absolutely, yes, I think and it has also accelerated like I said time for us to bring capabilities into the market, and it's also now opening up avenues for customers to now no longer look for external tools, external products to solve point problems. They are now also using AI as a way to solve challenges and pain points themselves, right, by introducing custom agents and whatnot.
Yeah, question for you: what about challenging regulated markets? Are you finding yourself having to figure out how to operate in GCC high, these sovereign clouds and things like that, because they're still hard, right? With all the requirements that they have and things along that line. Are you able to operate in those regulated environments, in those highly regulated cloud environments?
It is very, very hard, no doubt about that, Edward, right? But we are working our way through, navigate through those environments, right? And just sidebar, just even the contracts process for these for these enterprises and these enterprise deals, right? For us, and going back to my thing of like, okay, we are enterprise grade, we are stupid simple, even to deploy and build the pipelines, all of that, right? And then we get to the contracts point, and even our AI addendum, right, takes like, I don't know, months for approval, right? So while we are, bringing to market all these capabilities very quickly, the enterprises want to adopt, but I still feel there's work to be done as an industry, right, to streamline the process of AI adoption overall, right, even beyond your regulation. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that seems to be more challenging than any technology
Yeah.
You bang on technology enough, you'll figure it out. But
Yeah.
process.
Yes. I think as an industry, we have ways to go there. Yeah.
To get that done.
Yeah.
I know that I'm going to get to see a super in-depth demonstration of your product here next week with your team that will be boots on the street here in Atlanta. But one of the things we definitely want to get back, because our listeners are going to want part 2 of this. They're going to want to see it live.
Yeah.
And so, Gregory, I'll get in contact with you this week about the lab setup. We really want to lab it out because we get ready to go into our tech heavy months where we just let the engineers get on and show it. And then you'll see probably a lot of our listeners and everybody that actually put hands on the keyboard come back and, hey, we want to take a look at this. You said something at the very beginning of the show. You said you don't run any of the clouds, but you said you had your own cloud overlay. Can you explain that a little bit, or did I mishear that? Are you saying that you're using some hyperscaler, but you only have an instance where you can ingest into your cloud, or is everything around the cloud that the customer uses? I think I misheard something. I was thinking.
No. It's pretty flexible, right? It's up to the customers, where they want to deploy, DataBahn. So we meet, where the customers, want us to meet, right? So there's no, restrictions per se. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have our SaaS offering. Maybe that's what you heard it. Yeah, we have our SaaS offering as well. Yes.
Because you have Highway, Reef, Cruise, and some other cool names that you had going.
It looks like you've done your research, Edward.
I tried a little bit just to make sure, and I'm like, all right, you got a good marketing team. I like the name. It makes you at least go, what is Cruise? Is it like Cruise, or is it Reef?
Cruising down the highway.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. DataBahn. I'm trying to go through all my notes or write my notes down before you guys come on. I'm still a paper person to this day. Love the touch of it. This is more of a leadership thing. Time management and return on investment and impact. And that's harder than most people think, right? How do you choose where to put your time for the most impact? And I am greatly appreciative that you came on the show, because you could actually be out doing a lot of things, but to come on the show, I really appreciate that. There are so many conferences and all these things. What are some of the decision considerations that you have to say, I think we need to go there? Is it because you think your competition is there, future competition is there, or don't know the roadmap of your company? Do you think a potential buyer of the company, acquisition, something may be there? How do you go about finding the time to do this as a company? I find it very interesting with startups as early as yours and solving real problems.
Yeah, I'll give you my view on it, and I'll let Adi go as well, right? And again, for me, it's where our customers go, right? So we have active conversations with them because they are the practitioners. They are in the industry, right? Like, okay, so where do you go to understand the security industry, to understand the security market, right? So for a lot of that starts there for us, Edward, right? So we kind of follow our customers, if you will, right? In terms of shows, in terms of conferences, and so on. And of course, there are certain conferences we attend to get our brand out there, right? Everybody is there, so we go there to get our brand out there. There's a brand awareness element of it that we go to as well, right? Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. I love going to these startups, inventions and all these things.
Yeah.
One thing I did notice, and I got it right here actually, is that while some members of your team are going to actually train some members of my team on your product, are you guys going to come out with an official training curriculum or everything like that, or is that part of the services that when you come on? How does a customer come up to speed other than trial by fire? Because I would love to have had it up and running before you came on the show and then maybe ask them questions. But are you going to create official training curriculum or anything? Go through DataBahn driving school, high performance driving school?
I love that. Yeah.
Now we are working on a DataBahn driving school, Edward. So that's something that's come up, but we kind of looked from the other way. We wanted to have a as much of a self-driving car with just your hands on the steering wheel, so that it's not trial by fire, it's just by holding the steering wheel, so that it doesn't take a lot for you to connect the dots within the platform. Again, going back to this mantra of keeping things simple, but then now as we are expanding, now we have our larger partner ecosystem, now running deployments and proof of concepts and all of that. We're also, putting some, certifications there, so that when customers, work with partners, they know that, hey, they are, certified, folks who can deploy, DataBahn and all of that. So we're also, now, parallelly getting out some of those, streams as well.
Right. And sometimes you have to put the cart before the horse. People think that's a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. Sometimes you got to put the cart in front of the horse. And
it helps us, get a great deal of insight on, whether are people able to make sense of, what is it that we've been built, right? Without taking 2-3 weeks of extensive training and certifications there, right?
Mm-hmm. They'll let you know if you need a bigger horse. Put the cart in front, right? Well, this has been super informative. I do absolutely believe this is part 1 of 2. This is a history of the company, exposure, get it out to all our listeners who can go to your site. We'll have that all out on the post show notes. But I'm looking forward to getting to the point when we do our tech heavy month, we actually just do demos like, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what's going on. And we build out that environment, let everybody take a look. And I think that's going to be the thing that really brings it home from everybody. I have some ideas that I'll probably share with you offline, and maybe if you're coming into Atlanta, about that DataBahn Academy or that DataBahn training and a couple other things. Are there anything you'd like to part with and tell us about your company that some people didn't know? Like, I bet you didn't know this. You can't get this from a website. Is there anything you guys want to share? Got to be some tidbit. Something that you had a roadshow. Something. Right.
What's coming up, Adi?
I don't know. Yeah, I'll be like, I don't know. I barely sleep, Ed. I'm working 28/7, 380 days a year. Yeah. No, it was just a question. Sometimes when you ask people a question, they'll give you like or give you a funny like, yeah, I went to this customer and they kept calling them the wrong name for the entirety of the day. Then I got it right.
Actually, you know what? Now that you say that, we do get called Autobahn a lot.
Yeah.
Autobahn.
They'd be like, yes, what does Autobahn do again? So we do get, yeah.
So you at the next show, you guys are going to get a wrap around a Bugatti and have DataBahn across.
Maybe
DataBahn, not Autobahn. Right?
Yes, or maybe we need to start sponsoring some races, right?
That's
an expensive endeavor. I am a penny pincher. So if I was your chief revenue and marketing officer, like, no, we're not spending on that. That's not going to happen. Not at all. What's the ROI on that? The total cost of commitment. I tell people TCC, total cost of commitment. Do that, right? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I will have to say this. The entirety of your team, from the very first person I met until you today, have been super welcoming, super informative, super open. Them coming onto our team, my peers say, hey, we got to get this in our lab. We got to see this, right? We like what we see. Every customer that I've gone to, can't name them all because it's privacy, but if they're consuming your product, they like. One of the things that you put on there is cost optimization and cost reduction. The craziest thing I've noticed, and I won't say crazy, but the oddest thing is that the customer that I have that are using you are actually increasing their ingestion because they're finding more value with the way it's coming in now. It's just not blank. It's like, wow, we need to bring more of this in. I just finished writing a paper for them about it. And they're like, yeah, we need to increase our ingestion up a little bit because we didn't realize we need this telemetry to make these connection points. So when you can see someone that does the opposite of what your superpower is, like, we're not going to reduce ingestion. We're going to bring more in because we realize there's more value to it. I find that very fascinating. I love papers and counter positions that way. You're always welcome to come back on the show. Talk a little bit more. I look forward to. Are you guys coming to the? Am I talking too much? Are you going to be at the road show next week? No. Yes.
No. But our teams are coming there. So yeah, we look forward to that. And thank you for having us there. Yeah.
We'll take a lot of pictures. I'll share a lot of good ideas, and I really appreciate it. So to all our listeners, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Rod will be back. He's out doing important stuff. Frank is probably going to yell at me about not finishing on my AI certifications. This has been DataBahn. So go to databahn.ai. Got to say that really fast. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.
Now Frank comes back. Do you guys see that? Now he comes back. He probably went to get some Chick-fil-A.